The taste of tequila lingered on my lips, sharp and warm, as I stumbled through the crowded living room. The music pounded through the air, a bass-heavy rhythm that seemed to sync with the erratic pounding of my heart. My vision swam as I moved, the alcohol dulling my better judgment and amplifying every frustration that had been building for months. I shouldn't have been at this party. I shouldn't have been drinking, especially not like this. But I was tired of the silence, the neglect, the growing distance that had crept into my marriage like a slow poison. Ryan, my husband of 10 years, had become a stranger. Work consumed him, leaving little room for anything else. Late nights at the office, missed anniversaries, half-hearted apologies, it was a familiar cycle now. I tried talking to him, begging him to notice me, to remember who we used to be, but nothing changed. As I stumbled through the throng of bodies, the sharp sting of loneliness burned hotter than the tequila in my veins. That's when I saw him. He stood across the room, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark eyes meeting mine with a spark that sent a jolt through my body. He looked like the men I used to fantasize about as a teenager, confident, magnetic, and undeniably attractive. For a moment, I hesitated. But the tequila, along with months of bottled-up resentment, overruled any caution. I made my way toward him, my steps unsteady but deliberate. My breath hitched as I got closer, a flicker of exhilaration surging through me. I hadn't felt this alive in years. He noticed me before I reached him, his lips curving into a smile. That smile was an invitation, and without thinking, I accepted it. I leaned in closer, murmuring something I couldn't remember now, my hand brushing against his chest. His laugh was warm and easy, and suddenly we were moving, closer, swaying together in the pulsing crowd. As I danced with him, my gaze flicked toward the corner of the room. There stood Ryan, his expression unreadable, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. He was watching. My heart raced, not with fear, but with a twisted sense of satisfaction. For once, he was paying attention. The stranger's hand slid to my hips, pulling me closer. The alcohol blurred the edges of my thoughts, replacing guilt with an intoxicating mix of rebellion and adrenaline. I pressed against him, my body swaying to the beat. The world around me faded, the music, the laughter, the strangers, but I felt Ryan's eyes still fixed on me, boring into my back. When the song reached its peak, I acted without thinking. Turning to face my dance partner, I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him. The kiss was electric, a sudden spark in the middle of my numb existence. For a moment, I let myself get lost in it, shutting out everything else. But the moment shattered as quickly as it came. The sound of glass breaking snapped me back to reality. I broke away from the stranger and turned to see Ryan standing a few feet away. His face was pale, his expression a mixture of hurt and disbelief. The glass he had been holding lay in shards on the floor. The room had gone silent, the music abruptly cut off, and I felt every set of eyes in the room on me. Heat flushed through my body, not from the tequila, but from shame and panic. I tried to step toward Ryan, to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. He didn't wait for an explanation. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the house, leaving me standing there, frozen in the deafening silence. The stranger behind me said something, but I couldn't hear him. The weight of what I had just done came crashing down, cold and suffocating. I wasn't just trying to make Ryan jealous. I was trying to hurt him, to make him feel the pain I'd been carrying for so long. And I had succeeded. That kiss wasn't just a mistake, it was a match dropped into dry kindling. What I didn't know then was how far the fire would spread or how completely it would consume my life. The ride home was suffocating. Ryan's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white, his jaw locked in silent fury. He didn't glance at me once, his gaze fixed firmly on the road ahead. The hum of the car engine filled the tense void between us, punctuated only by the sound of my shallow breathing. The alcohol in my veins had dulled, leaving behind a sickly concoction of guilt and nausea. My mind replayed the moment at the party over and over, the kiss, the glass shattering, the raw hurt in Ryan's eyes. The adrenaline that had fueled me before was now gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. I turned to Ryan, desperate to break the silence, to say something. My mouth was dry, the words sticking in my throat. Finally, I whispered, "Ryan." But he flinched at the sound of my voice, his grip on the wheel tightening. His expression was cold, distant, as though I were a stranger. He didn't respond. As we pulled into the driveway, he parked abruptly, the tires crunching against the gravel, and climbed out without waiting for me. His steps were quick, purposeful, and by the time I managed to fumble with my seatbelt and follow, he was already inside the house. The door slammed shut behind him with a force that made me flinch. When I stepped inside, the air felt different. The house, once our sanctuary, now seemed foreign and hostile. The cozy warmth of our shared memories felt extinguished, replaced by an oppressive chill. Ryan stood in the middle of the living room, his back to me, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. I lingered near the doorway, unsure of what to do. My stomach churned as I stared at his rigid frame, the tension radiating from him palpable even from across the room. He finally turned, his face unreadable, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. The confrontation that followed was a blur of emotions. His accusations, sharp and unforgiving, landed like physical blows. He wanted to know how long I'd been planning to humiliate him, how many other times I'd betrayed him. My attempts to explain, to apologize, only seemed to fuel his anger. He didn't shout, didn't raise his voice. That would have been easier to bear. Instead, he was calm, precise, cutting. I tried to tell him the truth, that I'd acted out of desperation, that I hadn't thought about the consequences, that it was just one stupid, impulsive kiss. But the words sounded hollow, even to me. Ryan's trust had been shattered, and there was no way to piece it back together in that moment. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quiet, almost too calm. "There's nothing left to fix, Olivia." His words hit me harder than any shout ever could. I felt my knees weaken, my hands trembling as I tried to plead with him. But he simply walked upstairs, his footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. A moment later, I heard the door to the spare bedroom slam shut. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands as the weight of what I had done came crashing down. In the days that followed, our house became a Cold War zone. Ryan avoided me at all costs, leaving early for work and returning late at night. When we did cross paths, his silence was deafening. He didn't yell or argue, he barely acknowledged my existence. I tried to reach him, to break through the wall he had built between us. I wrote letters, pouring out my heart and apologizing for what I had done. I cooked his favorite meals, left notes on his pillow, even called him at work just to hear his voice. But nothing worked. He was distant, unreachable, his once warm eyes now cold and unreadable. One night, I woke to the sound of him moving around downstairs. It was late, the house dark and still, but the sound of papers rustling caught my attention. I crept down the stairs and peeked into the living room, my breath catching in my throat when I saw him. Ryan was sitting on the couch, a stack of papers in front of him, his laptop open. His face was illuminated by the pale glow of the screen, his expression grim. My heart sank as I realized what he was doing. He wasn't just angry, he was preparing to end things. 2 weeks later, my fears were confirmed. I was sitting at the kitchen table when Ryan walked in, his face set in stone. He didn't sit down, didn't soften his tone. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," he said, his words clipped and emotionless. "You'll be hearing from him soon." It was like a punch to the gut. I tried to plead with him, to tell him we could fix this, but he wouldn't listen. "This isn't just about the kiss, Olivia," he said, his voice low but firm. "This is about trust. Trust you threw away the second you kissed another man. I can't live like this. I won't." That night, I slept on the couch, clutching one of Ryan's old sweaters like a lifeline. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up, leaving behind an emptiness that seeped into every corner of the house. But the nightmare didn't end there. Word of the incident at the party had spread like wildfire, and soon, the whispers began. Friends stopped returning my calls. Invitations to events dried up. Even my family seemed hesitant to talk to me. At first, I thought it was the natural fallout of a messy divorce. But as the weeks went on, the rumors began to take on a life of their own. People weren't just talking about the kiss. They were talking about affairs, embezzlement, and even darker accusations. Everywhere I went, I was met with pointed stares and whispered judgments. I tried to ignore it, but the weight of the gossip grew heavier with each passing day. One afternoon, I ran into my best friend, Melissa, at the grocery store. When she saw me, her face darkened, and she quickly turned down another aisle. I chased after her, desperate for an explanation. "Melissa, what's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why are you avoiding me?" She looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust, her words cold. "I can't be associated with you, Olivia. Not after what you've done." "What I've done?" "Mel, it was a kiss. A stupid mistake. You know me." But she shook her head. "It's not just the kiss, Olivia. It's everything else. The affairs. The money you stole. God, the rumors about Ryan's brother. How could you?" My stomach churned as I realized the extent of Ryan's campaign against me. He wasn't just angry. He wanted to destroy me. As I made my way home that day, a text buzzed on my phone. The sender was unknown, but the message sent chills down my spine. "How does it feel to be the town pariah, you cheating whore? Ryan sends his regards." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about a kiss. This was a calculated, cold-blooded war. Ryan wasn't just walking away, he was determined to burn my entire life to the ground. And I had no idea how to stop him. The weeks that followed were a nightmare. Ryan's vendetta against me escalated, his influence spreading through every corner of my life like a poison. Friends disappeared, family distanced themselves, and even strangers on the street seemed to look at me with suspicion. What started as whispers about the party kiss had morphed into a tidal wave of lies. Ryan's narrative painted me as a manipulative, unfaithful wife with multiple affairs, a thief who'd embezzled money, and someone who'd even betrayed his family. The worst part? People believed him. Why wouldn't they? Ryan was a successful, charming businessman, and I was just the disgraced ex-wife who'd publicly humiliated him. The final blow came one Tuesday morning when I was summoned to a meeting with my boss. I was working at a small law firm, barely holding on to my position as the rumors swirled. As I stepped into his office, the tense expression on his face told me everything. "Olivia," he began, folding his hands on the desk, "we've received complaints about improprieties tied to your name. I'm sorry, but we have to let you go. It's not personal, but we can't afford the risk to our reputation." My stomach sank as I realized Ryan's reach had extended here, too. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but I knew it would do no good. The damage was done. With no job, no income, and no allies left, I found myself spiraling. My savings dwindled quickly, spent on bills and groceries. I moved out of the house I'd once shared with Ryan, unable to afford the rent, and into a dingy motel on the outskirts of town. The nights were long and sleepless, the weight of my circumstances pressing down on me like a physical force. Then came the divorce papers. The stack of documents was thick, meticulously detailed by Ryan's expensive legal team. He wasn't just divorcing me, he was systematically stripping me of everything. He wanted the house, the cars, the savings accounts, and even the sentimental things, like the antique table we'd bought on our honeymoon. His lawyers had even drafted a statement alleging financial misconduct, painting me as a reckless liability. I tried to find a lawyer to fight back, but every call ended the same way. Some claimed conflicts of interest, others simply declined to take my case. It didn't take long to realize why. Ryan had connections everywhere, and no one wanted to cross him. At my lowest point, I stood in the shower of my motel room, the water running cold, wondering how one kiss had led to this. How had my life unraveled so completely? How had the man I once loved turned into someone capable of such calculated cruelty? But my spiral hit rock bottom the day I saw Ryan's best friend, David, at the diner where I just started working. The Bluebird Diner was a refuge of sorts, a place that didn't ask questions, that offered me the chance to scrape together what little dignity I had left. Maggie, the kind-hearted owner, had hired me on the spot, despite the whispers that had followed me even here. For a while, I thought I could keep my head down, build something small but stable. Then the bell above the door jingled, and David walked in. He smirked as he spotted me behind the counter, his gaze raking over my waitress uniform. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for the other patrons to hear. "From lawyer to waitress. How the mighty have fallen." The humiliation burned, but I gritted my teeth and forced a polite tone. "What can I get for you, sir?" He leaned closer, his smirk widening. "Ryan says hello. He wanted me to check in on you, make sure you're enjoying your new life." My hands shook as I tried to stay composed. "If you're not here to order, I'll have to ask you to leave. David chuckled, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You think this is bad? You've got no idea what Ryan has planned. This little job of yours? It won't last. I watched him walk out, his words reverberating in my mind. True to his threat, a week later, Maggie called me into her office with a grave expression. I'm sorry, Olivia, she said, sliding a letter across the desk. I got this from a lawyer representing your ex-husband. He's threatening to sue the diner for employing someone with alleged ties to embezzlement. I don't believe it for a second, but I can't risk losing everything I've built. Tears burned in my eyes as I tried to explain, to defend myself. But Maggie's sympathy couldn't override her practical concerns. I packed up my uniform and left, my stomach hollow with despair. Ryan had taken everything. That night, I sat in my motel room, staring at the crumpled legal notice on the bed. My despair turned to fury, a simmering rage that ignited something deep inside me. I was done being his victim. If Ryan wanted war, I'd give him one. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Ryan had done everything to strip me of my dignity, my reputation, and my future, but he hadn't succeeded. Not entirely. I still had one thing left, the truth. And it was time to use it. I started small, pulling together everything I could find that might help me fight back. Old emails, text messages, photos, anything that could prove Ryan's vendetta against me was calculated and malicious. I combed through my memory, trying to piece together moments where his actions hinted at manipulation or premeditation. The breakthrough came late one night. I found an email exchange buried in an old folder on my laptop, one between Ryan and his best friend, David. It wasn't much, just a few sentences back and forth, but it was enough to prove that they'd been discussing ways to teach Olivia a lesson long before the party that started it all. Armed with this evidence, I went to a free legal clinic at the community center. Patricia, the lawyer there, listened intently as I told my story. When I showed her the emails, her expression shifted from skepticism to grim determination. You have a case, she said. It won't be easy, but if you're willing to fight, we can take him to court for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The words sent a thrill of hope through me. This was my chance, not just to defend myself, but to finally expose Ryan's lies for what they were. The next few months were grueling. With Patricia's help, I filed a lawsuit against Ryan. He retaliated with more threats, more rumors, and more attempts to discredit me. But this time, I refused to back down. The trial began on a cold, rainy morning. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt the weight of Ryan's presence across the room. He looked calm, smug even, as his high-priced legal team presented their case. They painted me as a liar, a cheat, and a fraud. The party kiss was brought up repeatedly, used as evidence of my supposed untrustworthiness. But when it was my turn to testify, I spoke with unwavering conviction. I told the court about the months of psychological torment, the smear campaign Ryan had orchestrated, and the financial ruin he had tried to inflict. The real turning point came when Patricia presented the email exchange between Ryan and David. It was the crack in his armor we needed. Under cross-examination, David faltered, his composure breaking as he tried to explain away their words. When Ryan himself took the stand, his frustration boiled over. She deserved it, he snapped, his voice sharp and angry. She humiliated me in front of everyone. I wanted her to pay. The room fell silent. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt cross Ryan's face as he realized what he'd just admitted. The jury deliberated for hours, but when they returned, the verdict was clear. Ryan was found guilty of defamation and emotional distress. The judge ordered him to pay damages and issue a public retraction of his false claims. For the first time in over a year, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me, microphones shoved into my face. I held my head high as I spoke. This isn't just about me, I said. It's about standing up to people who think they can destroy others out of spite or anger. No one has the right to take away your truth. In the weeks that followed, my life slowly began to rebuild itself. The damages awarded by the court allowed me to find a small apartment and pay off lingering debts. A few friends, realizing the extent of Ryan's lies, began to reach out, offering apologies and support. But the most important transformation was internal. I wasn't the same woman who had stumbled into that party, desperate for attention and validation. I had found a strength within myself that I never knew existed, a resilience forged in the fires of everything I had endured. One evening, as I was unpacking in my new apartment, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Ryan. "I'm sorry," it read, "for everything." I stared at the words for a long time, the weight of his apology settling over me. Part of me wanted to reply, to lash out, to make him feel the pain he'd caused me. But as I sat there, I realized I didn't need to. I had won, not just the case, but my freedom. I no longer needed his validation or his regret. I typed out a single response. "I forgive you. Goodbye." As I hit send, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The scars of the past would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I had survived. I had fought back. And now, finally, I was free to move forward. If you'd like to hear more stories of resilience and triumph, subscribe to my channel. Let's navigate life's challenges together.